So I have the pieces that I made the veneer using Judy Picarello's technique in my baking dish, and I'll talk a little bit about curing clay in another video, but I just wanted to show you that this is what I use, and then I cover it with a cardboard top so that it's sealed in, and that helps prevent the pieces from getting burned if I watch them really carefully. So now I'm going to set this aside, and we are going to do the Mokume Gane Melanie Muir technique, which is a bit different. So remember, we rolled the layers of color together about 4 times to get that really thin striped piece, and in that striped piece we could still clearly delineate between the colors. Well, Melanie Muir's technique is a bit different. You do the same type of thing, but you roll it through until you almost can't distinguish between the color layers. So it'll still maintain the separation of color, but we want it a lot thinner than that to get the intriguing kind of patterns from that. So I'm going to be trimming the top off of this veneer, and if I want white to be the primary color, I'm going to put it in the middle again. So remember, high contrast, I'm putting it in between the darker red and the darker blue. And this time I am going to even up the edge here. And I didn't stick it together so hard that I can't separate these colors, so that I can save that for either backing or, something like that. So now I've got a nice, almost 4 by 4, 3 by 2.5, 3 by 2 piece. Okay. And again, I rolled these out on a number 2, and then I'm stacking them together. And now I'm going to roll it together on my widest setting, which is a 1, and then I'm going to bring it back down to a 2, and we'll take a look at it. And it starts getting long and skinny. And I'm going to cut it in half. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 5. And again, we'll do the same thing where we're stacking the colors so that it does the same repeat. So I'm putting the blue on top of the red, lining up the edges, and again, laying it down so that I don't get any air bubbles in between the 2 layers. Okay, so we can clearly define the blue, the white, the magenta, the blue, the white, the magenta. So I'm going to run it through on my number 2 setting a second time. And then we get the same long piece. And if I would use the ruled edge, but it's all the way down here, so I got to count my squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 4.5. And again, we put the blue to the red, matching the fronts and making sure we don't put any air bubbles between the 2. Let's take a look at this. All right, so we still have a clear delineation, but it's getting much thinner. So we're going to run it through a number 2 another time. You can see the white kind of starting to come through the red, so this may be it, but we might be able to do one more. That's pretty fine. It's got a piece of plastic in there or something. Yeah, one more time and I think that'll be it. Because if we do it many more times than that, then we're going to start blending the colors, and that's not what we want to do. Okay, one more time on the number 2 setting, number 2 thickness. And I think that's going to be good. Let me test a piece right here. Yeah. So now it's so thin that, I mean, you can count the 4 layers, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you count the white, but it's getting so thin it's almost difficult to see the separation of colors. So that's perfect for her technique. All right. So now what we're going to do is, instead of using all of the tools that we had fun with the Julie Piccarello technique, we're going to use texture stamps. And the texture stamps that we need to be able to peel off of polymer clay. Now this one will spray with water as a release agent, but the depth of the texture of this one is probably a good 1.5 millimeter, 1 millimeter, so it's deep enough that it's going to press all the way down. We don't want a light one. Now remember this one from the other piece that I did. This texture is maybe, geez, I wouldn't even know, maybe 0.01 millimeter. It's not deep enough because I could put the texture on the top, but when I start cutting it away, we're going to lose the texture, and so we lose our design. Here's a really nice stamp, rubber stamp, that's got really deep ridges, so you can see that's going to make a really nice impression in the clay, and then you can also see what kind of design you're going to get. And I kind of like this one because it sort of goes with the flower theme of the blouse. It's not necessary, but that might be kind of interesting. I think I'm going to use that one. These ones, this one might be a little too busy, might lose some of that detail as we start peeling off the layers, but this one will work out nice. One of my favorite ones, though, is this one, kind of a starry night type of design, and it's got a really deep cut to it, so this one will come out really nicely as well. So I don't have to use the same pattern for this whole piece. I can use a couple different patterns. So I think to demonstrate this, I'm going to do a third and a third and a third, unless I've got something else here I want to use. And I don't really. There's these textures that you can get online that they're called polymer clay textures, but the thickness of this is not as good as how deep these are. This might come out, but I'm worried about it. Okay. All right. So I need a clean edge here, so I can do it this way. So I'm going to do a third of this. So I need to spray it. Just a fine mist of water. And that's just so that it'll release from the clay. If you don't do that, some of these, especially when you're pressing really deep down in, you'll get pieces of clay stuck in there, and then that'll ruin your effect. All right, so let me lay this here. And this is where it's hard. If you've got young hands, you probably won't have problems with this, but, you know, as we get older, we get arthritis and different things like that. You've got to press down these stamps really deep into the clay, and so that's going to take some pressure. So I'm actually going to stand up, and you want to make sure that you don't move the stamp as you push the texture in. but I want to make sure that I get a really, really deep impression. So that's looking pretty good. Let me do some more. Now, some people might say, well, why aren't you using the roller? Well, the roller would actually distort the pattern because it'll make the stamp move on the clay, and you don't want to do that because it'll distort your pattern. To get a really clean pattern, which you'll see why you want to have a really clean pattern when I start working on the layer. All right. Okay, so yeah, that's a really nice pattern. And notice how cleanly it released because of the water. All right, and then I'll do this crackle one. I think I'm just going to have to kind of wing it in order to be able to get that in there. Maybe overlap just a little bit. And I'm going to go to about here. So again, just pressing really hard. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't spray it. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that it's going to release nicely and not tear my clay. All right, that's good. Probably because this is a little thicker rubber backing. Okay, and then the last one that I'm going to do is maybe this corner of this design. Spritz with water. It doesn't need to be drenched, just a little bit. And let's do it this way. Yes. All right, yeah, that made a really nice impression. Okay, so we have three different textures on this veneer. And remember, the veneer is really, really thin. So what we're going to try to do is just start revealing the color by slicing off the top of the texture here. So it's important, again, to have a really clean, really, really sharp blade. You'll want a flexible blade because you'll want to bend just to start taking little bits off. This one would be fine too, but I tend to want to use a shorter blade so that I have a little bit more control. So I'm going to wipe it with a baby wipe. And I am going to start right here. There's no really rhyme or reason as to where you start. The other thing I need to do is make sure I collect the scraps, because you can use the scraps to make a different kind of veneer. So I'm going to put it on my deli wrap paper. All right, so just barely off the top, okay? See what I'm doing? I'm just barely taking the texture off. And you can see how it starts revealing what's underneath it. And the nice thing about this is that if you accidentally go down too far, like you're really starting to take too much of the top off, you can just come back and heal it up again and come back and just start to take the top off. To see how we start to get a really interesting pattern here. And even when I did take a little bit more of the red top off, you get that pattern revealed a little bit more. And so as you do this, you can decide how deep or how shallow you want to keep it. I like this a little bit more than this over here, so I'll probably take this off a little bit more, but I want to start revealing this texture here. And don't be tempted to do too much, because then you do lose control of your blade. You just want to do like a ½ inch, controlling very carefully. And try to keep your strokes as smooth as possible, although we are going to smooth it down with the patty paper, parchment paper, and our burnishing piece. So this is interesting because this texture has more open space to it, whereas this was very tight in between the pieces of texture. So this should reveal a much more open kind of texture. And although I said I wanted the white to be the main color, I ended up with the red as the main color. So what I would probably do the next time is I'd make sure that the white was on top, because you'll see that the red's going to be sort of the background color. So you can play around with how you're layering the colors too. See what this flower looks like as we peel it away. That's nice. Okay. All right. I'm going to finish that up later. You don't need to watch me do this. And let's see what this one looks like. Maybe went a little too deep there, but I like how that pattern is revealed. So again, with this technique, we're not taking slices of the veneer off as different pieces we can work with. This is just going to be the one veneer, although we can take these scraps and do something with them as well for a different kind of veneer. We still have some water on some of that, so some of the clay is sticking. Doesn't want to release from the blade very well. So you get the idea. So I'm just going to keep on working on this till I get it down to where I want it, and then I'll come back and show you how we're going to make it a smooth surface.